Welcome to the Nonprofit Voice, a podcast series brought to you by NonProfit Pro, the go-to resource for nonprofit management and strategy. In each episode, we're going to sit down with leaders of nonprofit organizations, the people responsible for paving the way for our sector, along with key technology strategy partners who are transforming our industry. Here at the Nonprofit Voice, we'll have refreshing conversations in which we will all learn more about the convergence of nonprofit and technology. Be sure to follow us on social media and visit our website to find more episodes of the Nonprofit Voice. And you can download all of the Nonprofit Voice episodes on iTunes, Google Play, or Spotify. We will have all the links down below. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Nonprofit Voice. I'm your host, Nhu Te, Editor-in-Chief of NonProfit Pro. So I hope everybody is having a marvelous week. I know I am. And thank you for joining us today on today's episode. We've got a really fun episode lined up for you. I have two very special guests joining me in our talk. So everyone, please welcome Amy Ganderson, Director of Digital Marketing at March of Dimes, and Jared Sheehan, CEO of PwrdBy. Hey, you two, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
Wonderful. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us today.
My pleasure. So in episode number 10, we're going to get into mobile apps. We're going to talk about mobile strategy, considerations of mobile app development, lessons learned, and so much more. But before we dive into all that good stuff, I wanted to take a few minutes to learn a little bit more about my guest. So Amy, can you share your background in the philanthropic sector with us?
Sure. So my name is Amy Ganderson. I've been with the March of Dimes as the digital marketing director here for coming up on 2 years in January. And previous to that, I've worked at two other large nonprofits, both United Way Worldwide, as well as the Nature Conservancy. So I've been in the nonprofit space for quite some time now. And previous to that, I've been in e-commerce and also retail marketing. So just excited to be talking to you all today about mobile.
Awesome. And Jared, how about you?
Yeah, I actually come at it from a different background, which is so cool. So I have been running PwrdBy for the last 4 years. It started about 5 years ago with a group of us. And prior to that, I was in the corporate social responsibility side of things, working at Deloitte Consulting, trying to think through how big organizations were giving money to different nonprofits and those sort of things. But I've had an opportunity to work with a number of different nonprofit organizations, probably most notably the Children's Miracle Network. And then personally, I've just done a ton of different things with the nonprofit world. I did a bike trip across the U.S. after I graduated college. I've done a bunch of peer-to-peer fundraising things and those sort of things. So very passionate about it and got to work with quite a few of them. So
very cool stuff. All right, so let's talk about mobile. Mobile is becoming such a vital part of, all of our everyday lives. So Amy, I'd love to get your take on this. Can you speak on the power of mobile in our sector and why nonprofits should include it in their communications?
Sure. I think mobile, when you think about it, what's the one thing that we bring around with us every day? It's our mobile phones. It's really our connection to everything that's going on in the world. And so with nonprofits, I think the first and foremost, you have to think about how is your website, your core digital platform, how is that optimized for mobile? Are your donation forms optimized? How does that mobile experience look? And really think about mobile first. I feel like we hear that often. What does it really mean? Well, when you're designing any content and you're looking at user flows, you have to think about what does it look like for the mobile user? It's going to be a lot more stripped down than what the desktop experience is. Just for example, at March of Dimes, the bulk of our traffic is coming from mobile devices. So we're constantly thinking about what's the mobile experience? How do we prioritize what we want people to do through, just that mobile experience on your website? So to me, that's where it really starts. And then there's also, of course, which I know we're going to be talking about today, is around that mobile app usage. And then also just mobile communication, texting with our supporter base. There's a lot of exciting work around that as well.
Yeah, actually, I really love what Amy said, and I actually think the thing that you take with you most to most meetings is the mobile phone is such a good example of it. I mean, mobile is the current largest technological or societal technological change that's happened since the internet, and it's just part of every part of our life. I mean, there are 200 billion downloads of mobile apps globally. The largest tech companies are either mobile phone developers like Apple or mobile app developers like Google, or both like Google. And if you look at penetration of mobile devices and things like that, I mean, it's greater than 96% across the US between ages 16 to 64. So it's just mobile is everything and everywhere. And I couldn't agree more that people access websites and web and everything like that through their phones. And there's some really interesting information about if you receive an email, what's the time period that you're going to be able to look at that email compared to if you receive a text message. And email, it's somewhere in the range of about an hour. You'll see it and respond to it, but a text message, people respond, I think it's something crazy like 85% within the first 2 minutes. So it's a really engaging device. We have it with us at all times. We're constantly checking it, which there's some probably societal questions related to that, but it's really important. And it's one of those things that everyone has to have good strategy around it. And we can dive more into the mobile app piece of it there, but I do think apps are a very specific piece that get a lot of attention because of the boom of it. But I agree with Amy's overall sentiment that get your bases right around responsive web and thinking about texting and before you get too deep into the app space.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The mobile device is such an important part of most people's everyday lives. They bring it with them everywhere. They access different websites, different mobile apps on it, and that's it's the way society's heading right now. So it's really smart for nonprofits to kind of look at their mobile strategy and making sure all their communications are mobile friendly, right? So the next step when it comes to mobile strategy for nonprofits is upgrading to creating an actual mobile app for the nonprofit. Jared, I would love for you to kick this one off for us. What should a nonprofit take into consideration when creating a mobile app? And along those lines, when is a good time for a nonprofit to consider launching one?
Yeah, absolutely. I recently wrote a piece on this, and frankly, I think that most nonprofits won't ever need to create their own mobile app. If you think about it from a user perspective, there's nothing smartphone users dislike more than having to download another app. So you have to have a really great targeted use case to make that mobile case to want to build your own app. And there are so many amazing apps out there and some terrible apps out there. And I think the ratio of terrible apps to amazing apps is probably like 100 to 1 or something like that, maybe even higher. So you have to really, really think through the process before you do that. And there are probably a few simple questions to ask yourself as you think through it. One is, do you have a really great mobile use case? So that's thinking about, is this an app that people would use on the go, in their car, in an airplane, or something that requires a camera? And anything that requires a camera is a pretty good use case right now for a mobile app. Two, do you have the right audience, right? So if you have to require someone to download an app rather than go to a website, you're going to lose people right away. So you have to make sure that your audience is either really interested in the discovery process or a captive audience. And then 3, has someone already built it? And there are so many apps out there. Most of them are built. Amy hit the nail on the head that the mobile use case needs to feel simpler. It needs to seem like it's a simpler experience. You can do less with it so that there are less use cases that people can go through. So a lot of people have already done a lot of the use cases people are trying to do with new apps. And then finally, do you have the right team? So mobile seems fairly affordable because the use case is pretty simple, but it's a pretty complex and unique use case that is difficult to actually get right. And users are not very forgiving if you don't get right on a mobile device. Because essentially you're competing with an Uber app or a Google Maps app. And those are really, really well-built applications. So it's difficult to, if you don't have the right team to do it. And then finally, is it a core competency for you? Is it something you guys want to do? Is something you want to do internally, externally? But those are the last ones are ones that you have to figure out once you've kind of made the commitment that you want to do that.
Right.
So those are the major things I would say.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point because, the worst thing for a nonprofit to do is not have a great case for a mobile app, and to make donors, supporters, whoever download another app. It becomes very tedious. So it definitely has something that the donor supporters are going to use a lot and be interactive on as well. So Amy, I know March of Dimes has a few mobile apps. Can you talk about the process of how you guys decided it was time for you guys to make a mobile app?
Yeah, I think, I think Jared really hit the nail on the head. I mean, I've personally been a part of a number of different mobile app use cases. Some have failed, some are better than others. And it really is about the audience, the right use case for that audience, and then, adoption and really having a good promotional and marketing plan on like who that target audience is and how they're going to get their hands on it, how it's going to be measured, and then the budget and resources around it, right? So you can launch an app, but if it's not stewarded and reformatted based on all the changes that all the platforms are having and all of that, it really could be a potentially even a negative experience, right, for your brand if it's an app that you developed a few years ago that's out of date. I think one good use case with March of Dimes specifically is that we set up, I think it was back last year, we launched a My NICU baby app. So the intent of the app is to be used for parents who have babies in the NICU. Gives people things like tracking feeding, getting connected with other resources, all the things you really need to know about when you're in the NICU. And, it's a really tough time for a number of parents and families who are in it. And they're looking for resources just to make their lives a little bit easier as they're going through it and taking care of their child as they're in the NICU. So that's one, I think, really good use case that March of Dimes developed last year, and with the help of an outside partner, and that's we've seen a lot of growth with it.
Awesome, that's great. So along the lines of March of Dimes mobile apps that you've created so far, can you dive into some other ones that you guys created and perhaps offer some tips for success?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think I think and we've had a couple of other apps. We have an app for March for Babies, which is our big peer-to-peer fundraising event, walk event that happens around the country. So I think there is a use case to be had there, right? If we have a big activation or community engagement event, how can we provide people with tools to help enable them to reach out to their networks, to fundraise, to just get really excited about an upcoming event. So that's another use case that we've had. I think, again, it comes back to some of the marketing basics when whether or not you can make an app successful. It's, do you have the right audience in mind? Are you targeting that audience? Do you have it integrated in with a lot of your other marketing materials? So it's built into the flow. It's not looked at as the separate project, but it's really augmenting all of the other resources that you have. So good example, like back to the My NICU baby app, is we have tons of other information to help parents around just their, going through the tough time of having a premature baby. So they can get connected with like a Facebook group or a closed community on our website, or they could use this app, right? It's part of a larger portfolio of support resources rather than it's just a standalone item.
Yeah. And I love that March of Dimes thinks of the audience when creating the app. And like they're getting something in return. They're getting resources to help them, whether it's the parents for the NICU or the peer-to-peer campaign. So kudos on that. Jared, I'm sure you've seen a lot of failed apps and you've probably seen your share of successful apps too. Can you share some insight on some great apps that you've seen or developed?
Yeah, absolutely. So broadly outside of the the nonprofit sector, I think the gold standard for an app is like a Google Maps. And I know that sounds cliche, but the fact that someone can put in a point from A to B and have real-time traffic data, speed limits, speed signs. I mean, there are so many things that they add into it that's Waze similarly. Like any of those sort of apps are really kind of the gold standard for building mobile apps, which as a developer are things that's so far and above anything that a normal organization would need. But it is kind of like, if you think of it from a maturity perspective, you have a basic application where someone can log in and see some information. That's probably the most basic app level, all the way up to these things where you can do real-time engagement with millions of users at any given time and do a bunch of different things. In the nonprofit sector, my personal favorite app is the Washington Trails app. I'm a big hiker, get out a lot. I get to, you can go in there, you can find hikes, you can find trails with the hikes, geolocation information, trail information, all that sort of stuff. You can create your kind of like bookmark different ones and things. You can make donations and all these different aspects of it. And then other ones that are nonprofit specific, I should say these are organizations that have nonprofit specific components. I really like the fact that Instagram now has a donation button. That's a really cool use case. And then some stuff that we've kind of worked on that's been pretty fun. Probably our most notable one is an app called InFlight, which is turned into another app called Amelia. But what that is kind of like a Yelp for people who do corporate partner fundraising. So people who are going out stewarding corporate partner at a location-based perspective. It's providing real-time fundraising information, contact information, check-in, donations, photos, kind of like everything you'd need prior to or going and engaging with an organization, and those different things when you're meeting with corporate partners like Rite Aid and Walmart and those sort of things. So just a few different things there. One last thing I'll say is the stuff that I'm really excited to from a mobile perspective in the next year or two, and you're starting to see some different pieces of it, but I think it's going to get a lot better in the next few years, is related to the payments piece. And payments is, I should say donations, but payments can be a little bit more than just donations, but the transaction of money and how that works with different mobile providers and things like that. I think there are a few things out there that are kind of cool, and we're going to see a lot of really cool things coming out here in the next few years, I think.
Oh yeah, I think that the next 5 to 10 years are going to look a lot different than they do now, and I think there's going to be a lot of advancement opportunity for mobile, and I personally am interested in seeing that happen. But Jared, since I have you talking about this, from your experience working with nonprofits, what are some challenges that nonprofits encounter when they have made that decision to launch a mobile app?
Yeah, and I alluded to a few of these earlier. I think the biggest thing is people not spending enough time in the beginning thinking through what is the use case and what is the audience. Whenever we start a new project with someone, we always take them through an ideation process. So basically structured brainstorming. We sit them down and say, hey, what's the problem? Come up with some very specific, concrete problem statements, figure out who is the user, bucket the user into different people. Is this a corporate partner fundraiser? Is this a major gift officer? Is this a donor? If it's a donor, are we talking about donors that are ages 35 to 55, 15 to 25, different age groups, different geographic location, things like that. And then going through and mapping out some of those issues related to how do you solve for specific things to specific people? Because the way I use my mobile phone is probably totally different than the way Amy used her mobile phone. And if you can get one of the two of those right, you have a chance at a good mobile app. If you try to go for both immediately, you'll definitely fail, because each of them will have very specific use cases. A few other issues that often come up. People generally think that if you build, like for a website, if you build a website and put the website out there, it usually has enough of the initial version that you're going to iterate on it and improve on it, but it's got a lot of the meat there. Oftentimes with mobile, we say come in with a very slim, slender MVP style use case, and you're going to need to do probably like 5x more research than you would otherwise, because you're going to need to give people a mobile app, put it in their hands, figure out the devices people are using, and see how they interact with it, because mobile is a very unique experience than a website engagement is. And the second thing that often goes wrong is mobile device testing. So build for iPhone first if you're in the US, build for Android if you're in some other countries, but being able to test across the hundreds of different devices that are out there makes it really difficult. So prioritize which devices are most important, where you want to focus, and really make sure that you hit home those devices effectively. And then the final piece, and actually Amy brought this up, and I think was a really great point. If you don't have a significant enough marketing budget, and particularly if it's going out to a large population of people, you really, really, really need to have that. And if you don't have that, the app, even the best app in the world, could fail because it just doesn't have the traction needed to get it in front of people.
Great. Amy, I'm curious, have you encountered any of these challenges in any of your mobile app developments?
I feel like I've probably encountered almost all of them. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this speaks true. I would say, definitely on the investment. And when I look at investment too, I look at what does it take to build it, but then what does it take to, continue to evolve that app over time. So you really have to look to see what's the multi-year plan attached to keeping it fresh and building upon what's working after you start seeing some of the results come in. And then, of course, allocating a good chunk of change for that promotional investment.
Mm-hmm.
I would say another challenge too, just before you even get started, think about, is a mobile app the right thing for this use case, or is mobile web more appropriate? I think a lot of people just think, oh, an app is cool and it's great. But you have to really think through, can we design this on our website? Should we be is there a utility here that could just serve better in a microsite or a section on the website? So I think that it's good to start with some of these basic questions before you get started. And one other thing also that we think about is multi-language. So when you're getting back to that audience question, if you have a large Hispanic audience, like you have to think about, do we want to do apps in different languages, and just not have that be an afterthought as you're putting your plan together.
Yeah. So obviously there's a lot to consider when you're deciding to create a mobile app, and obviously a lot of challenges when you actually do. And we talked about this a little bit already, but Amy, just like to clear the air and set everything in stone, why shouldn't a nonprofit create a mobile app?
Good question. I think a nonprofit shouldn't create a mobile app if they can accomplish the same task through mobile web, through their website. And if they don't have the budget to really budget and use case and audience defined to really make it happen. I remember when I worked on one of the first apps that I worked on in another organization. I remember talking to somebody and it kind of stuck with me. They said, take your mobile app budget and times it by 3, and that's how much you need to really make it successful. So I think it kind of goes back to a question that Jared, he mentioned earlier, just making sure, does it really make sense or not? Is it a place that a nonprofit really wants to be in, or is there, an opportunity to work with a vendor, or maybe not do it? So I think it's all of these things really play into the fact whether or not it's appropriate for your organization to create a mobile app.
Great. And Jared, I'm sure you have very strong thoughts on this. What about you?
I actually sometimes think that most of my job is telling people why they shouldn't build mobile apps, because I so often do that. But I agree with Amy. I think mobile messaging, mobile responsive is better. And there have been a number of times that I've taken a project that could have snowballed into, 100,000 or more project that we said, wait a second, why don't we just build a really simple WordPress website just to test the idea out. And it didn't work the way that people wanted it to. And they tested it, they tried it, and they realized, oh, well, maybe this other thing is really what we're going for. Maybe the use case isn't exactly what we thought about. So there are so many different use cases like that's why mobile is a tricky one. What I would probably add is I would say you shouldn't build a mobile app if the user is only going to download that app for a specific event. It's typically not a very good use case because they'll do it for the event and they'll delete it. The only time that that's not true is like a multi-day conference or something like that. Those apps work pretty well because pretty much the people will get lost somehow if they don't have that, which is, you know, a good geographic or geolocation based example of it. The second use case is if you just think people are going to download it because they know you, like your brand equity, it's probably not going to work, right? So if it's just information about you or your brand, like at one time, we were working with someone that thought that, you know, every nonprofit should have their own mobile app, like they have their own website. And the truth of the matter is that's just not at all compelling for users. That they don't want to go and, you know, support March of Dimes, for instance, by going to the March of Dimes mobile app, like, you know, the same as a website, right?
Right.
Third one I would say is internal organizational use cases for mobile are usually very good examples, because it's pretty easy to figure out, like, if this person is on the road doing these activities for 50% of their work week, and we can save 20% of the time by creating a mobile application to make it so their job is easier. And, you know, the way I always think about that is like removing Excel spreadsheets, paper documents, even email, and translating those into mobile devices. Those are pretty great use cases. Anything that requires a lot of analytics, a lot of trying to chomp through a lot of data and things like that, those are pretty terrible examples usually. So try to stay away from one that the user has to do a lot of actions, but focus on ones that they either are quickly doing things, quickly thinking about things, are doing something in the moment. It's part of their theoretical process flow already, but you're just translating it into a new process flow. Yeah, so the internal ones work really well for that. And then the final one is, you know, mobile apps work really well if you are trying to get someone to spend a lot of time engaging with content that they are doing in a situation that they don't otherwise feel comfortable, right? So it's kind of the opposite of the couch example, right? If they're sitting on their couch, maybe they're playing on a mobile phone or something like that. But more than that, if they're sitting on, think of any transportation device, airplanes, trains, anything like that, and they don't have a book with them and there's no other form of entertainment, mobile is great for that. And creating compelling content that you can do in those sort of situations, those are great mobile use cases. But outside of that, you have to be really careful for those different things. And you know, all I would say around creating a mobile app is just spend more time up front thinking about the use case, the audience, all those sort of things. And oftentimes you'll figure out that you don't actually need a mobile app for that.
Right. Great advice. All right. So we like to end every episode with one final question. And Amy, I'm going to have you go first for this. If you give one piece of advice for nonprofits, what would it be?
I think my one piece of advice would just be make sure mobile strategy as a whole is embedded into your, you know, marketing and engagement plans. And what that could mean different things for different organizations. That could mean that mobile web is where your focus is going to be, and just making sure your website is in tip-top shape for a mobile user. It could mean texting is going to be your sort of big bet, right, for the next year. And really think through, are you going to use peer-to-peer texting or SMS texting? You really think through what's appropriate for you, and really just spend a lot of energy into it. Because I think it's important, while just coming from a marketer's perspective, you know, we're worried about, you know, email and social and advertising and and the website, all of these other things that are happening too. We have to think about how is mobile really impacting all of that work, and you can't ignore it, right? You can't say, oh, well, we'll work on that next year, or oh, it's not going to be a trend that's going away. I think it's got to be really like integral into all of the work we're doing and called out as a specific priority for your organization.
Great stuff. And Jared, how about you?
Yeah, and I'll come at it from a what's called a product perspective. So in the next 5 years, mobile isn't going anywhere. Now, what the definition of mobile is probably going to change, right? Right now it's a smartphone, maybe it's a watch, Maybe soon it's going to be a device attached to your refrigerator. Maybe it's glasses. Who knows what it is? But the concept is essentially the same, and that is removing the user friction between the technological interface and the individual. So mobile is really important. I agree with everything that Amy said. But as you think about it from your strategy perspective and trying to do ideas, if all of the things I've described around why mobile is difficult to build and roll out hasn't deterred you yet, then you probably have a pretty good idea. And just make sure that you are iterating on it and really focusing on getting the use case right over and over again. Build simple WordPress websites to try things, do prototyping, test early and often, and just keep iterating, and let the product build itself in a lot of ways based on user feedback. So it's a really exciting world that we're in, and if you really have a cool use case around mobile, it could be the next big thing essentially, right? Which would be really cool. So my last piece of advice is don't let people deter you. And if you are doing it, just make sure you really focus on iterating and improving.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Both very great advice from the both of you. So that about wraps it up for today's episode. I want to thank our listeners for listening on today's podcast. And Amy and Jared, thank you so much again for hopping on with me. I had so much fun talking to you about mobile strategy.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been great.
And on behalf of NonProfit Pro, we will see you in the next episode of the NonProfit Voice. Have a great day.